The poet Beth Ann Fennelly, a native of the Chicago suburbs, is now as rooted as kudzu in the American South. I spoke with Beth Ann Fennelly at the J.D. Williams Library at the University of Mississippi in Oxford. Well, Beth Ann, this is a pleasure. I'm glad you had time to come in and talk about your poetry for a little bit.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
You actually have a poem. We are sitting in Oxford, Mississippi at Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. You and I from New York and Chicago. Mm-hmm. But I have not written a poem in which I inquire of myself if I am a Southern writer, but you have. Are you now, after all these years, a Southern writer?
Well, I don't think that that is a title I would claim for myself, but I'm flattered when other people give me that appellation. I went to the University of Arkansas for my MFA. I lived there 4 years and now 6 in Oxford. And I'm really interested in the idea of Southernness and what makes a writer Southern. But I still feel like I couldn't claim it because I feel like I would be, I think I might make people angry if I, proclaim myself a Southern writer. But I'm so interested in the topic of Southernness, and it's something that I write about and think about a lot, maybe more so than people who come by it naturally.
What would make you a Southern writer if you were suddenly to be one?
Well, I'm from a suburb of Chicago, as you said, and I taught for a while at Knox College in Galesburg, which is the prairie. And prairie architecture is really flat and wide and open. Frank Lloyd Wright, big vistas, big square doorways, really subtle, and you're supposed to learn to appreciate the prairie. And my whole life I never learned it. And when it came to the South, I just loved the landscape, the lushness of it. And it seemed full of mystery and really kind of over the top in a way that maybe suits my personality. And some of the things I like about being an Irish American are things I like about the South. I love music, families, storytelling, and all those things of an area that doesn't seem Irish but was settled by Scotch Irish. That's so much a part of the culture here, the emphasis on food. Sadly, the emphasis on drinking, probably, all that is part of what I like about being Irish and part of the South. And when I moved here, I became fascinated with kudzu, that vine that grows everywhere and covers everything and makes of everything this beautiful landscape that's also killing the thing it grows on. And I ended up thinking about kudzu as a metaphor for my own experience because kudzu is originally from Japan. And it was brought to the U.S. For the World Expo to Philadelphia in 1856, I think. And because it was transported here, it didn't come with its beetles and all the things that eat it. So it flourished in the American South in a way it never did in Japan. And now it's pretty much taken over, and it caused a lot of erosion. And I began to think, what does it mean to be someone who grows better as a transplant than in your original location?
Right. Well, you wrote a huge sequence of poems about kudzu, and interspersed in there are facts about kudzu and dates, the date at which people stopped promoting kudzu and the date at which it became a pest and people started eradicating kudzu and so on. But vistas, there's a line in one of your books that you quote, where you quote Barry Hannah. It says, one thing about Mississippi.
In Mississippi, it is difficult to achieve a vista. Yeah, I think that's
Especially in the hill country.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You have now, besides the letters in Great with Child, you have 3 volumes of poetry. And they are, I'm reading through them, I think volumes 2 and 3 have a lot of similarities, but volume 1 is different and then you change. Volume 1 seems to me, and other people have said this of course, much more international, many more persona poems, less personal. Is that how you, when you go back to your first book, is that how you think of it?
Yeah.
More intellectual, maybe?
Yeah, I had a lot of wider kind of influences that time. I was trying a lot of different styles. I was experimenting with a lot of different voices, and part of that was trying to figure out, who I am as a writer and going through the apprenticeship of being a student of writing and trying different voices and different styles. And I liked that I wasn't writing about myself so much, and I liked that I was writing about different people in history or across different time periods, historical locales. And I imagined that I would continue in that vein forever. But the second book actually is intensely personal because something happened, which is that I found that I was completely unprepared for an experience I was going through, and that experience was motherhood. When Tommy and I got pregnant with our daughter Claire, I just want to be a great mom. I want to get an A+. So I read every book written by any pediatrician about infant cognitive development and behaviors, and I thought I had all the questions answered. I was going to, I had it nailed because I studied for it like it was a PhD exam. And then Claire arrived, and I was completely unprepared because no book prepares you for something that's so much wilder and harder and better than is written about in any book by any pediatrician. So I was filled with a sense of questions, and I wanted to understand what I was going through. So I started writing poems because for me, poetry is the best method of investigating the human soul. So I ended up writing a whole book about my daughter's first year. I didn't intend to do it, and if I had known what I was doing, maybe I would have stopped myself. But
no need.
Well, it is strange though to have that book. It's so intensely personal, and the character in it is Claire. The husband in it is Tommy.
Yes.
I can't even stand up and pretend. Now the speaker in this poem, it's so clearly about me and my life, and that reading the poems from that book was a more intense and fraught experience than reading the poems in my first book, where maybe some of them were based on my life, but so many of them weren't. Who could tell?
Well, the first book reflects a kind of international.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about your biography, but I know that you've been in Paris some, and I know you've been in. Was it the Czech Republic or was it still Czechoslovakia?
It was newly the Czech Republic. I lived in a coal mining village on the Polish-Czech border the year after I graduated from college. So
Why?
That was 1994. I just wanted a challenge. I wanted to do something different and difficult, and I thought it'd be good for me. I had done a little traveling. I had gone to Eastern Europe, and I knew there were opportunities over there for people to teach English, so I just rode away to Eastern European embassies and took the job that sounded the hardest. Yeah.
So you did. That's what you did. You taught English language.
I did.
And a year?
Yeah, I was there a year.
Yeah. And you said a lot of, there's not so much of your work in Czech Republic. A couple of allusions here and there to your to the beer and the young men and being in the Czech Republic. But there's a good deal set at the Terminus Hotel, and there's a good deal set in Paris. How does Paris fit into your poetic system?
It's just the city of my imagination, city of dreams. I haven't spent so much time there that I could claim to really know it, but I just feel alive when I'm there. But
you do go there. I mean,
sure.
It isn't imagined.
No, I've never lived there, though. I've never, I couldn't claim to be intimate with that city.
I was amused by your adventure in, I think it was Italy. I think it had to be Rome, where your credit card went into the machine and did not come back out again.
Oh, that was sad. Yeah, Tommy and I went to Italy for our 5-year wedding anniversary, and so we just made the big deposit in our checking account to go over, and we were going to use money out of our ATM. The days of traveler's checks seem in the past.
Right. No, ATM is it.
So we went right away, and we're going to go and get red wine and a lovely meal, and we put the credit card into the machine, and it didn't come back out. And we punched in numbers for an hour, and nothing happened. And it was 4th of July weekend in the States, so the offices of the bank were closed. I just thought, the machine is broken. I was convinced desperately, because I already had a bad feeling, that surely I could just go back in the morning, they'd open up the machine and it would be, but it wasn't there. And they said what happens is, they say gypsies, but I don't know who they think is responsible, put double-sided tape in the machine, and after you leave, they have fishing wire and the double-sided tape, and they pull your card back out. So by the time I got through, in a phone booth in Rome, and they were checking on my machine, they said, well, the first charge is for a $1,500 leather jacket. And then they started going down the list, and I just knew it was bad.
This story has a happy ending, though, finally. I mean, you didn't have to pay.
No, we didn't have to pay a penny. And I was almost surprised that they believed us. But,
it
they
was
do.
Not the first time.
Yeah,
sure,
I guess we've been paying our credit card fees for all these years for something.
Reading in your work, about this is public service. I mean, what we've just done is valuable. Be careful.
That's
And
right.
your conclusion, as I remember, was do not use ATM machines when the bank is closed.
That's right. That's what I learned from that experience. So
Poets, in America, not enough people read poetry, but poets do. And you're a student of poetry as well as a poet.
mm-hmm.
And as moving along through your work, I see who is it that you talk about? Who is it you refer to? And let me lay this out. In your early work, it looks much more like Emily Dickinson and Marianne Moore and May Sarton and who else now?
I love Plath.
And Sylvia Plath,
and Elizabeth
yes,
Bishop.
and Elizabeth
Those
Bishop
are probably
especially.
my big ones,
You-
yeah.
You even make a remark about Robert Lowell proposing to Elizabeth
Yes,
Bishop, although
that's true.
he shouldn't have.
No, he shouldn't have.
No, but then later you have a long sequence of poems that are basically Huffy Henry poems, that are Berryman poems.
Yeah.
How do you, looking back over poets that you like and poets that you admire and poets you learn from, how has that evolution occurred?
Well, they're all poets that I feel like I'm in a conversation with, even though they're deceased, because they have poems that are challenging me or nourishing me or troubling me that I go back to again and again. And I feel like my relationship with them, sometimes I'm being hard on them or criticizing them, and I feel like maybe I'm taking too many liberties, but it was really born out of an intimacy. The way, you and your sister can make fun of your mom, but no one else better make fun of your mom. That type of feeling where, that Bishop who I adore, has some things that I think are really silly about her life, or like Yeats, who I'm crazy about, was into the Ouija board and lived on the land of rich women so he could write about their swans, and so I do write a lot about different poets and think about them and criticize them or worship them, I guess. And the Berryman poems are in the new book, and that just came out of a fascination with his poetry, especially his use of syntax, and then thinking about the difficult issues of inheritance. In other words, Berryman was brought up Catholic and left the Catholic Church and came back to it at the end of his life, and then probably left it again because he committed suicide. And I was brought up Catholic too, and left the Catholic Church and am now struggling to understand what faith is right and where my spirituality is. And another thing about Berryman is his father was an alcoholic who committed suicide. And my father was an alcoholic who, died of cirrhosis of the liver, which is, of course, a kind of suicide. And I was just thinking of all these things of what does it mean to be the inheritor of certain instincts or genes or even the desire to write poetry? And are we beholden to our fate? Can we choose our fate? Is character fate? All these questions. I guess I want to write poems that help me figure out what my questions are, not provide answers. But I felt that in thinking about Berryman's life, I might better come to understand my own. And that's why I addressed him in that sequence of poems.
Yeah. You mentioned at one point that you had gone through high school, what would be considered to be a very upscale and first-rate high school, but that no one had taught you any poems worth knowing.
Yeah.
But then at Notre Dame, they did.
Yeah, I did go to a very upscale girls' Catholic boarding school, and I think the emphasis was on having us be ladylike.
Not making poets there at
No.
Woodlawn, or what was it?
Woodlands Academy of the Sacred Heart,
Woodlands,
yes.
yes.
But poetry is not ladylike at its core. It's too honest, and I think it takes a kind of fearlessness to see honestly and to think honestly, and only when you think honestly can you have political change or evaluate. That wasn't really encouraged. That would lead to rabble rousing, I think. So it was only when I got to Notre Dame that I had my first classes where I really learned what poetry was, and I'm always grateful to my teachers there. John Matthias in particular was someone who really was important to me and is still a confidant.
Yeah. I remember you saying something about how the Dickinson poem you were taught in high school was the most utterly bland and antiseptic of all.
Yes, her only one. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. Yeah, and she's so wild. She has these other poems, where she's, people think she's ladylike because she didn't publish that much, but she was burning with ambition. I play at riches to appease a clamoring for gold, she writes.
Yes.
She was clamoring for gold.
Yeah. Not to mention Wild Nights.
Yeah, right. And so why didn't we ever get any of those poems?
I don't know. I don't know what goes
Yeah.
on there at the Woodlands Academy of the Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
Recently, I guess the letters themselves were actually written, 4 years ago even?
Yeah, they were.
You had occasion to write, let's see if I get this right. A friend of yours was moving to Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
She had been a student friend, right?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
She was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
She was a little frightened. She didn't know anyone in Alaska. And you volunteered to write her a letter every day?
Yeah, I know that sounds crazy, but she was visiting my house when she found out she was pregnant, and her mom had just passed away, and she was moving, and newlywed, and didn't want to start a family yet, and she just panicked, and I just thought, gosh, it was hard for us, and we had all the help in the world.
Yeah.
I've got a great mom, So I did promise I would write her a letter every day, and I think that it was something I said to her to make her feel better, but I think I ended up fulfilling my promise because it helped me. Because, after I wrote the book of poems about my daughter's first year, the book, it's called Tender Hooks, I thought I had said all I needed to say, all I was interested in saying. But when you're caught up in the newness and the dailiness, sometimes you don't really get perspective on the changes that take place later, or the more profound ones, it takes a little bit longer to articulate what those changes are. Mm-hmm. And so this experience of writing to this former student of mine ended up being interesting for me because she didn't have a computer, she didn't have email, and I think that was the other thing. I was writing longhand.
These are real letters.
Yeah, they're real letters.
United
which,
States Postal
I don't
Service.
ever do that, know.
Right.
And so I did it for a year, and then she one day said, my friend is pregnant, can I loan the letters to her? And I said, well, sure, but I wrote them to you, they're not going to be interesting. I don't think your friend's going to care. Well, that woman wrote me a letter, said, can I loan these letters to my friend?
Yes.
And so this started happening, and right about then, my agent from, my editor from New York called and said, what's happening with the new book of poems? And I said, well, Carol, I don't know, I'm not writing poems. And she said, you're not writing anything? Well, I said, well, I'm writing these crazy letters. And I told her the story, and she said, well, can I see them?
Right.
So it was really great because I kind of wrote the book by accident. And then, poetry doesn't make any money, but for this book, I actually got a little bit of dough. And right then, I got pregnant with my second baby, so I was able to take time off and be home with him.
I suspect, I've read through Great with Child, and I suspect that book could really have legs. I mean, that book is, even though it's you, and it's personal, and it's your friend, and it's definitely a person you're writing to, it is an experience which is shared by millions. I suspect that book will do well, and it will do well for a long time, because those experiences, labor, nursing, they don't change much. They haven't changed since we were in caves. Something about that book that I'm curious about this, again, it's a question I don't know the answer to, and that is, did you have any sense as you went along of writing a volume of memoir? Because when I read it, I had a very strong sense of learning a lot about you, as if you had perhaps meant to say, here's the story of my life. But it just comes in bits and bits and bits.
Yeah, I really didn't. I mean, I guess that makes me sound really naive, but I think if I ever had a sense that I was, writing a book or giving advice or being in any way a role model, I just never would have done it, because I don't think of myself at all as having answers or, being an expert, or, even, I don't define myself as a, professional mother or anything. So the fact that other people have taken solace from this book, or, seem to have, found it useful or relevant to their lives, is really surprising to me, but lovely.
Well, women become pregnant. They swell up. They have discomfort. They go into labor. They give birth. They nurse. They have children. Mm-hmm. And it's. I'm not. I don't know why you're surprised. I'm not surprised at all. I think a huge number of women will enjoy it. Lee Smith enjoyed it.
She's so great,
isn't she?
Yeah, I love her.
Yeah. And I think she's right too. I think the book will do well. It is an odd kind of thing, though. People struggle for ages to publish a book, and you sort of get one by accident.
I know,
almost.
It's not fair.
Oh, it's all right.
I should come up with a different story.
you make reference to, and at different times, you make reference to Gauguin, you make reference to any number of Impressionists, Post-Impressionists, and the American, or not the American, but the woman Impressionist, Morisot, whose name we will agree to pronounce how?
I'm not sure.
Okay, all right, but she is thinking about her and thinking about literary conferences that I've been to, where there were a lot of men, and you. You've identified with Miss Morisot as a woman in what is very often a very, say it's Fairhope, Alabama, say, a lot of men, a lot of...
Yeah, I love Fairhope.
Yeah. But there are difficulties involved in that too. I mean, it's she had to make her way. She had to struggle. She had to be taken seriously. Are you having a sense of identification with Ms. Morisot?
Yeah, I'm sure that's what led me to that. What ended up happening was I was in Washington, D.C. I went to the National Gallery, and I was taking a tour of the museum, and the docent brought us over to a painting by Morisot, and she said, "Do you notice anything strange about this?" And someone in the group said, "It looks like the painting could be divided in half." It was called The Artist's Sister and Mother, and the mother was done in very heavy black outlines, and the sister standing behind was done in pastel. And the docent ended up telling us a story about the night before Bertha Morisot entered that painting into the Academy Salon. She asked Edward Manet to come over and look at it. And she said she wanted his opinion, but really she wanted to impress him. I mean, this girl was 24. She did this amazing painting. Why wouldn't he come and praise it? And he said, "Well, it's really good, except for the mother's skirt." And he took out his paintbrush and repainted the mother. And I was really stunned by that story, and I said to the docent, "Well, what did Morisot say? What did she do?" And the docent said, "Well, no one knows." And I just thought, gosh, for her to be that good at 24, because, keep in mind, this is a time in Paris in the Academy where the male painters could paint from life. They could paint a nude model, but then the female painters had to leave. They weren't allowed to stay for that class. So for her to be that good, to overcome, so much sexism, and to be that determined, when she's supposed to be getting married and everything else, that I just wanted to know how she could be so good and let him maul her great painting.
You promised you would read and recite a poem, and I think we can say this is the first poem in your forthcoming book.
That's right.
This book is about to be released.
Yes, this book comes out in April 2008, and this poem that opens the collection is set here in Oxford, Mississippi, but I have never read it here in Oxford, Mississippi, because I feel like it might cost me my job, or at least it's about a certain occupational hazard, but here it is. First warm day in a college town. Today is the day the first bare-chested runners appear, coursing down College Hill as I drive to campus to teach. Hard not to stare, because it's only February 15th. And though I now live in the South, I spent my girlhood in frigid Illinois, hunting Easter eggs in the snow or trick-or-treating in the snow, an umbrella protecting my cardboard wings. So it's hard not to see these taut colts as my reward, these yearlings testing the pasture. Hard as they come toward my Nissan not to turn my head as they pound past. Hard not to angle the mirror to watch them cruise down my shoulder. Too hard, really, when I await them like crocuses. Search for their shadows as others do the groundhogs, and suddenly, here they are, the boys without shirts, how fleet of foot, how cute their buns. I have made it again, it is spring. Hard to recall just now that these are the torsos of my students, or my past or future students who every year grow 1 year younger, get 1 year fewer of my funny jokes and hip references to Fletch and Nirvana, which means some year if they catch me admiring the hair downing their chests, centering between their goalposts of hip bones, then going undercover beneath their shorts, the thin red or blue nylon shorts, the fabric of flapping American flags or the rigid sails of boats. Some year, if they catch me admiring, they won't grins which make me, busted, grin back. Hard to know a spring will come when I'll have to train my eyes on the dash, the fuel gauge nearing empty. Hard to think of that spring, that distant spring, that very, 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 please God, distant spring.
Good. I don't think you'll get into any kind of trouble with that. And thank you very much.
Oh, thank
This has
you,
been a joy.
Don. For me as well, thank you.